Welcome to the Good Shepherd 4th, 5th, and 6th grade farming area. I am introducing Grace Kyle today. Grace comes to us at Good Shepherd with experience in agriculture and teaching. She had an interest in leading a farm-to-school program, and so she worked in the classroom as an assistant for 2 years and has been on the land for the last 2 years, solely bringing the classroom work and the farm together. And she's going to be sharing her her ups and downs with getting that started, and a little bit about our program on a different scale. The 4th, 5th, and 6th grade have a much smaller scale on the same landscape as our junior high, which moves, the junior high moves into the microeconomy of farming and thus has a full-fledged urban farm. So let me turn you over to Grace.
Thank you. Hi, and welcome to our upper elementary garden. This is used for grades 4, 5, and 6. Before I show you around, I'd like to just explain to you how our school works and how often the children are coming to the garden for instruction, just to give you an idea of what we were working with these last 2 years. So because we're at a Montessori school, one class will be made up of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders all together. And because they're in the same class for 3 years, we do our curriculum on a 3-year cycle. So here, the first year is botany, the second year is zoology, and the third year is microbiology. So by the 3rd year of instruction, the students will have had a full year of each of those subjects. But many of the things I will share can be used within just a 1-year timeline, condensed or zoomed in, however it works for your space and your time constraints. Our students come out to the farm once a week for about 1 hour, 45 minutes. It fluctuates depending on the season. During the winter time, we primarily do things indoors, and that's usually more research based, but they are given 1.5 hours to 2 hours solely for farm instruction, garden instruction, which has been really wonderful. In addition to that, once a month, we go off campus to a field trip relating to a topic within the realm of farming or conservation or local food systems that are happening in our town. So that's a great experience for the children to see what's happening off of our campus, and then hopefully tie it back into the work that we're doing here. So now I'd like to show you some of the infrastructure components of our farm that I've found to be just really helpful in the beginning years of getting things started. The first on the list is our tool shed. So in here we have some of the basic things that students will need to work on the projects that I have planned. We can go in and look a little closer at how I have it labeled and organized, just to give you the idea of simplicity, organization, and labels. That proves really effective for this age group. Here we have some of our hand tools. I have everything labeled and counted. That way I and the students are always aware if we're missing something to go out and look for it, which happens often. Watering cans, gloves, hand tools, measuring tape. We also have some bigger items. Wheelbarrows are a very popular tool with this age group. We have 2, and I find that 2 is a really good number for my class size. Usually I'm getting about 25 students in one class. I will then divide them up into 2 groups. One group might be doing a project with tools, and the other group might be getting a lesson, and then we'll switch. And so 2 wheelbarrows is good because they're sharing, but they have enough to get things done. Over here we have large tables. These are used for demonstrations and knife skills, cooking demonstrations, tasting. They've been really helpful just for getting things up off the ground sometimes so that we're not bending over a lot. And then over here we have a set of just basic tools: shovels, hoes, rakes. As you can see, I don't have very many of each, again, because we're trying to incorporate sharing and teamwork in all of our lessons. And I don't love the idea of a bunch of 4th graders all having their own shovel. I think that sharing and waiting and taking turns is really important. A huge part of the beginning of the year is having the students become comfortable with where things go and how they're used. So I do a big lesson on tool safety and the responsibility of putting things away and taking care of our tools so that the longevity of them lasts. We've had a variety of things donated to us through parents or fixed by parents. And then in your packet, there will include like a sort of item by item budget, just so you can get an idea of like the startup costs for some of the tools that you might have to purchase. But I really recommend relying on your community, maybe having like a used tool drive or something, because people always have tools lying in their garage that they might not be using anymore and can be really useful for your program. So this is our 3-tiered compost system. It's made of T-posts and hog panel. Those are 2 items you could get at like a Tractor Supply or Rural King store, and they're just pretty basic to install. I installed this mostly with parent volunteers, but some students also helped. We use the compost weekly. So our students usually collect things from our cafeteria and then put it in our system. So they're constantly interacting with this composting system. And then I'll also do specific lessons, whether it's on the maintenance of a compost pile or the microbiology or decomposition going on in here. We chose the 3 system for a couple reasons. We wanted something that was easy to manage. So part of the maintenance is having students either turn the pile or switch it over to the next area. And so I didn't want too large or heavy of a pile so that the students could move it themselves. It's also a wonderful visual for learning because in this far left side, they're adding new food scraps every day. And then once that starts to build up and be turned and get hot, we move it to the center. And so even in that process, the students can start to see the breaking down of organic matter into smaller pieces. And once we move that, we'll start adding new here and then turn this a little bit less regularly, but watch it as it continues to break down. And then in the springtime, usually we'll move that over again and kind of shift again. And this will be our finished product that we'll then use in the garden for spring planting. So I just find that this is a really great visual for them to start learning about the decomposition process and the difference between carbons and nitrogens and ratios and things like that. And a lot of them really just love the manual labor of moving piles. So that's been really popular. Okay, so next I'm going to show you our raised beds. Those have proved to be essential in getting our school garden started. We decided to go with stainless steel because in previous years our wooden ones have just broken down and not proved to be long-term useful. So we went with these. They also have an open bottom, so we're hopefully adding to the soil here and just creating hopefully multiple layers of healthy soil. We chose to go with 4 just based on our class size and how we divide up the class. So like I said earlier, I usually have about 25 in a class, and I'll take half of them and work maybe on 1 or 2 beds during a time, and that just ensures that everyone can kind of fit and see my demonstration. These just have been wonderful and is where we usually give lessons on the actual planting, weeding, watering, pruning, and harvesting of our vegetables. I've added since then other beds throughout. So as you can see, I have mulch in the pathways, which is given to us by local tree companies who need a place to dump their wood chips. So that has been wonderful to block out weeds. I include the children often in using mulch for that purpose. That's one of their favorite projects, is to go get a large load of mulch and then come here and put it wherever it's needed. I also use straw a lot to keep the moisture in and hopefully block other weeds from coming up. So we've just expanded year by year as if these are in full swing but I need to give another planting lesson, I'll make a space and see where it goes. I also wanted to show you our straw bales. This was an experiment this year where we wanted to try planting potatoes in the straw bales. So I have potatoes in there. Some of them are starting to come up, which is a great sign, and then planting some things on top. And it's just another way of adding a place to plant if your space is tight. And there are so many different things you can do with straw. So I recommend using it in some capacity. It's a cheap and easy way to get more surface area to grow. So the next thing that we use in our farm to school curriculum is a worm bin. Terry Niemeyer has given a really great detailed lesson of how to set up a worm bin and how to maintain it in another video provided to you during this conference. So I'm just gonna touch on a few things that have been useful. First is the setting up. I think that it's a great project for students to do. There are all kinds of ways that they can be involved, not only in the beginning of setting up, but also throughout the year. There's maintenance. Our students have jobs that change weekly in the classroom, and so this is given to each class, and they're responsible for taking care of it each week with snack waste and things like that. It's also a wonderful busy work for students who might, I don't know, need a break to cut strips of newspaper and have kind of an ongoing pile. That way it can be continuously added to your worm bin. In addition to that, there are specific lessons I'll give on vermiculture or composting in general, and they'll collect data and observe what's going on in their worm bin and kind of get some insights on how the decomposition process works. And then they have loved also harvesting the worm castings and seeing them used in the garden. This group really likes to get their hands dirty, and a lot of them love to touch worms, so that's always fun too. We've just found that this has been a really great ongoing thing throughout the year that the class can take ownership of, and it just, again, offers a really great visual of what's happening during the decomposition process. It also offers a touch point on food waste and how much we can do to reduce the amount of food going into a landfill, and then reuse that nutrients in our garden. And the students really relate to that and see that as a powerful thing that they can have ownership of. The last thing that I'll show you is our greenhouse. This was newly constructed this summer, so we have not used it yet with the students. We purchased it used, and we're really excited about the potential of having it to extend our growing season here in northern Indiana. And I just want to show you a little look at its simplicity and its size. I think we'll get a lot of great use out of it. So for this part, I just want to touch on some of the themes of the lessons that I give throughout the year. In order to sort of switch it up and not have the same pattern every single week, I try to have a focus each week on a kind of lesson. That way the students are getting a variety of ways to interact with the land. And so I brought you to our Pollinator patch because it offers a lot of different points of interest and lessons. So the first, I think, really most important one is observation. I try to get the students in the habit throughout the seasons to pay attention to what's happening and learn how to write about it and make notes about it. All the students are given a farm notebook, and so we use that for them to take notes when I give certain lessons, but then also about every other month come out and sit for a little bit and just pay attention to a spot on the farm that they are looking at in different seasons to notice how it changes. I found that with this age group, guided observations are the most fruitful. And so in the packet, I provide some examples of that, whether it's giving them specific things to look at and notice, or giving them charts and having them look at things and take specific notes about the characteristics of a flower, a bee, fungi, whatever it might be. Sometimes just the blank page observations are a little challenging for this age group, and so helping them sort of know what to look for has proven really useful. I also find that in They're learning about science and collecting data. Charts are really attractive to this age group. So I have those included in the packet as well, where they learn either how to make their own charts or fill in a chart that's given to them. And that's a skill set that they'll use into the future, whether it's for science or any other sort of data collection. So another theme that I try to incorporate into my lessons throughout the year is team building or games. This just seems like a really great social way of interacting with the information, especially for this age group. They're just very drawn to games or any sort of slight competition in group work. So I try to keep it fun in that way, especially on like the hot days where there's a lot of body work to do. And there are a couple examples that I'll give you, but there's just so many resources out there and creative ways to incorporate the information you want them to learn with a game or an activity. So at the beginning of the year, I really try to have a project where everyone can be involved, that there's like a visual end that they can all sort of collectively be proud of. The pollinator patch that we saw earlier is one example of that. We did sheet mulching there, so the children were involved in soaking the cardboard and laying it out, measuring how wide we wanted our space to be, and then using compost on top of that, and then we did a broad seeding of wildflower seeds, and those were all sort of separate lessons, but the visual, especially now a year or two later, I think still sticks with them, and they're able to kind of take ownership of that spot and say, I was a part of that, I helped contribute to that. So things like that are really great, especially in the beginning of the year, because it just sets this tone that we're all in this together, we're all contributing to the land in some way, and I think that that's very meaningful for them. Games are another way, and I've had a lot of fun making up games or incorporating recess games into our farm curriculum. This has been really wonderful, especially in the winter time or like the fall when it starts to get cold. I've made the mistake sometimes of giving lessons where we're sitting around and it's like 45 degrees and they're all shivering and realizing, oh, we need a break, we need to run around, we need to get our bodies moving. And so if you don't have a project that day, games are a great way. I made up a game that I will include in the packet, but essentially it's like a tag game involving fungus, bacteria, and invertebrates that help decompose the dying plants. And it just has really taken off. Sometimes they even play it at recess without being instructed to. So sometimes it might be one game that you reuse, but they just like it so much, and it gives them about 15 minutes maybe to warm up and kind of get their wiggles out before you go back into something more directed. The next component of our lessons is maintenance and stewardship. That's really essential to the mission of our school, is just taking care of the land that we have and hopefully making it better than it was in every way that we can. And so just basic things like watering and weeding kind of fall under that umbrella. But also conservation projects or projects that will only boost or benefit what we're already doing. And so I usually have a lesson that involves some example of that, and then we'll implement a system that helps with that. One example of stewardship and also maintenance is seed saving. We do a lesson on dry seed saving and a lesson on wet seed saving, and this ties in our regenerative practices in our hopes of saving seeds and reusing them each year. It also ties into artificial selection and lessons on genetics and picking from the best crop that you have in hopes that next year your crop will be taking from those great characteristics. And then it gets it's a hands-on experience where they're looking at a tomato and looking inside and seeing what the seeds look like, how they feel, or cutting dried flowers and taking apart marigolds or echinacea or something like that, and just learning how that seed might travel throughout the environment and locate itself in a new spot. So those are just two examples of maintenance and stewardship where they're learning to take care of things and get a closer look at what it means to really take care of them. The next theme in our lessons is exploration. This is so important for this age group to feel the freedom to look around and explore. It's similar to our observation theme, but sometimes it's a scavenger hunt or something where they're simply looking and noticing, again, in a more game-like way. I just find that their energy craves exploration, and so we do that on campus as well as off campus. If we go on a field trip, I try to incorporate exploration. They're eager to see and look and touch and feel, and so as often as they can use their senses, I try to give them space to do that because I feel like that's just a natural way for them to learn. The next theme of our lessons is academics. So I've been fortunate to work with the guides here at Good Shepherd who are very open to incorporating other subjects into farm. Farm is really a great subject because it can incorporate just about any other subject into it. So it's been really fun to take cultural lessons or history lessons and then tie it into farm and food and sustainability in some way. Oftentimes this is a winter lesson or a series of lessons because it's just easy to do that inside when things are not great outside. But it's another wonderful way for students to engage in their school subjects and see how food and agriculture and the environment are all related to almost everything that we study. I just encourage you to make relationships with the teachers of other subjects and find creative ways to incorporate their subject into the farm lessons. The next theme of lesson is knife skills and taste testing. We usually do as simple a recipe as possible. We currently do not use any indoor kitchen, so we just try to keep it simple, have recipes that involve raw ingredients, which is fairly easy to do if you have the right produce. I will mention that if you're not growing the produce that you might want to use, then it's totally a viable option to find that produce locally through a farmer or a place that carries local farmers' produce. And one option from there is to also visit with your students a farmer's market and purchase those items and then bring them back and prepare them in some way. Salsa, pico de gallo is a great activity. The flavors the students really like, and it's just a really easy one. You can even kind of fudge the ingredients and it still kind of works out well. And simple taste testing is a great place to start. Just cutting up a cucumber and snacking on it is really lovely and enjoyable. Watermelon as well. We are fortunate that usually when school starts in mid-August, there's still like watermelon and cucumber available. So I usually use those as kind of an initial starter. I like to have the students involved in cutting, so I create spaces on our tables outside with the cutting boards and knives and do a whole spiel on knife safety. But I feel like it really empowers the students and kind of gets them to interact with the food in a different way and hopefully encourages them to maybe start helping at home if they already aren't. And it's just a really fun way to taste what's happening and growing throughout the seasons. The next theme of our lessons is service learning. As I teach about food, local food systems, I found that it was really encouraging to have the students know and understand what's going on in the greater community. South Bend has a lot of various organizations working on missions that are very aligned or similar to ours. And so I try to find those organizations and have us go to wherever they're working and maybe do a small little service project for them or help them sort of with whatever they do to serve the community. So one example is a food rescue organization here in South Bend that takes food from all over and repurposes it for meals for students on the weekends who might not have access to home-cooked meal. The students really love just being involved in that service project. Another one is a community garden that tries to make produce available and accessible to members of the community all over. They always need people to weed and water or sheet mulch, and so just spending an afternoon with them was really valuable to the students and just gave them an idea of the ways in which other people in our community are trying to get good, healthy food to those of us in need in the community and those who really care about environmental and food justice. The final theme of our lessons throughout the year is individual research. Similar to tying in other subjects in the winter, the students will also often be prompted in the winter time with an individual research project. I usually base this on the cycle that we're in. So this past year we were in zoology, so the students chose an animal that they would like to research, specifically a farm animal or one that is domesticated for farm production. And we went to the library and they learned how to find the books that they needed with the information they needed. They helped come up with a list of questions that would be helpful to look for in their information, and then their teachers helped guide them through an expository writing or persuasive writing process. And so that was really rewarding. We spent about 8 weeks from going to the library to the finished typed paper, and they were getting both the excitement of learning about an animal that they could raise sustainably, as well as the skills of researching and writing and kind of compiling information into a succinct paper. In this section, I'm going to talk about how I organize my lessons and the things that I consider when doing that. The first is the size and age of the group. So that's just something you want to think about. Too many kids doing too few small tasks can kind of create chaos. So when you're thinking about your age group and the number you have, thinking about spacing and what you have them doing is vital. I would consider dividing up a group in half if it gets to be more than about 10 to 15 children. And then if you have the option of helping or using a volunteer or another teacher to help you occupy that group with an activity while you give a lesson, that's something to consider. The next thing is the degree of specificity within the project. So there are some tasks like seating that require individualized attention and focus. And so in those instances, I try to have small groups where I can make sure that they're doing it correctly and have the space and elbow room to do it. Other activities like moving piles of mulch or watering require less oversight, and so you can have multiple children doing that in multiple locations. Those are just two things to think about when you're imagining a lesson and what you want to accomplish in that lesson. Time constraints are a huge one. I find that it's better to start with less and then maybe have something in your back pocket if you use up all that time. But it's important to consider things like water breaks and cleanup. Those two things are really important that the children participate in. Water breaks, especially because it gets hot out and they're moving their bodies. So modeling that and always having a water bottle is a really good practice. And then cleanup. My students are always involved in the cleanup. So I allot 10 minutes at the end of a class period to make sure that they're finding the tools, putting them back where they go, and just making sure that everything is put up as best as it can. So those are two things to think about within your window of time that you have. The next thing is adult assistance. So we're fortunate at our school to have another teacher involved during the farm class time. And so that's part of how I think about what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. So reach out to parent volunteers or administrators in your school and see if there's any way that you can have somebody on hand to just kind of help as an extra pair of eyes to oversee a project. Weather and season are huge here. I always have a rain plan, and I'm thinking about if it's really hot or really cold, how to have things done in the shade or, like I said earlier, playing games to keep students warm. That way they're engaged and not miserable. This seems to be an age group that does not dress for the weather. And so modeling the right appropriate attire, whether it is hot or cold, is really important, and then reinforcing that every week. If you have a regular farm session, reminding the students, okay, bring your boots or bring your rain jacket. this age group just loves to show up without any layers on, and then they're too cold to focus. And so just getting in a habit of reminding them that like what you wear outside is really important and can affect how you interact with the outside. The last part that goes into organization is the technology available to you. This can be particularly challenging in indoor scenarios where students are doing individual research. So I would just encourage you to utilize your library, your local library or your school library for resources. That way the students have at their fingertips what they might need for their research. If your school has access to tablets or individual computers, that can also be really helpful for research that you can't find in your library sources. However, I would make sure that you are aware of the school's rules on how to navigate the internet and which sites are appropriate for like true information. I always give a lesson on how to do that and how to research effectively, because I find that it's just a great starting place when then you release them to find whatever questions they're seeking to answer. So the last thing I'll go over is just a quick overview of the packet that will be provided to you during this conference. I have my botany and zoology timelines, and this is sort of a sequence of lessons that I gave throughout an entire school year based on those themes. This also includes some vocabulary lists that I found were really useful in getting started. I also have some resources that I found really invaluable for me as an educator. A lot of them are geared towards high school and college age students. So I just read them and tried to understand them and then kind of curated something that was more appropriate for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So I've included that as well as additional resources that have pre-made lessons. I found that there are just so many things out there that if you look closely, you can kind of take their ideas and then make it your own depending on your situation. But it means that you don't have to always start from scratch. So I encourage you to use what's available, and then also feel free to be creative with what you have, because there's just endless possibilities.
So, my question is, what do you do in a situation where a student just doesn't want to engage in the activity or in that day's particular program or anything like that? How do you navigate to kind of get them, if they aren't going to do the activity, at least to help contribute in a way?
So for students who are apprehensive or unwilling to participate, I go about it in a couple different ways. If it's like a large project where we're moving a bunch of things, I try to always find something small even that they can take ownership of. And if they're hesitant to do one thing, I try to think of ways in my back pocket to do another thing. Something that's like proven to be really helpful for me is having maybe a student leader of the group, or somebody who can help keep track of what the directions are. So if it's somebody that just isn't feeling it, but maybe likes a little bit of authority, I might say, okay, you're the note taker. I'm gonna say what we need to plant, and you need to take notes and then remind everybody, we're planting broccoli 12 inches apart today, or something like that, to where they're taking ownership. Oh yeah, I'm gonna help her or the group remember what we're doing. So for some students, they love that, and I try not to boost their ego too. You're not in charge, you're just helping us remember. Sometimes they're just having a bad day, and honestly, I try not to force, because I have another teacher. They might know more of the dynamic of that day. Maybe they got in trouble, or maybe something's happening at home, and I kind of defer to that teacher, is this a time where we push, or is this a time where we let them? So it's really case by case, but I think the benefit of a regular meeting with children is that you get to know what they like. And so I always have students that do not like bugs and do not like dirt. And so I try to, get them to at least interact with those things. But if they're really, really hesitant, and I've tried multiple times, then I'm just kind of always thinking in the back of my mind, well, so-and-so is going to be my seed passer outer, or my ruler checker, you know, and just give them a little task that they feel like they can do. Yeah.
So where did your funding come from to get your infrastructure going, your startup?
Great question. So first, our school allocated a budget for this to happen. But in addition to that, small grants have been really valuable, and just picking and trying to find the small ones that are attainable. And then in addition to that, we have really generous families. So whether it's donation of money or tools or what have you, we estimate that the startup cost for this area that you've seen today was about $2,500. And a lot of that is just a one-time cost. Then you have the raised beds, you have the tools, and the proper maintenance. Those can last a really long time. In addition to our greenhouse, which we bought used. So there are lots of options to do it where you have the kind of basic things that you need to get started without too high of an upfront cost.
In summertime, when you don't have students and staff as often, how do you keep up the garden?
That's a really good question. So our students are done with school at the very beginning of June, which is right as things are ramping up. But fortunately, our school hosts a farm camp each summer. And so the staff and children who are a part of that can help maintain and water. But that can be a challenge for some schools who don't have that option. But just finding ways of being creative and using the infrastructure that you have to keep things watered and weeded is something you definitely have to consider. Thank you so much for joining us in the Upper Elementary Garden today. I hope you got some helpful information. As we have started, we're only in the third year of production here, but feel like our lessons have gone really far just in these 2 years. So I encourage you on your journey. Best of luck. Thank you.